Riley and I sat together in shock. What do I do? I asked. I mean, should I go to the police? That would probably be a waste of time. This really doesn't prove anything. If anything, they'll question Craig and he will make up some lie. And then he'll know we're onto him. Or more specifically, that I'm onto him and went through his stuff. And I can't just move away either. For one, I wouldn't just leave you here with him. And I can't afford to move away anyway. Craig is both my boss and my landlord. And I don't have the money to just pack up and move. What do you think I should do? Well, let's just calm down for a second, Riley said. Let's not tip off Craig and let him know that we found any of this. We already have next month's video put together, so if he's actually going to make this other video, it might not be for a while, so let's not panic. Riley and I continued to try to figure out what to do next. We decided for the time being, we were going to do two things. Not let Craig know we are onto him, and make sure I never went anywhere with him by myself. I sent a text back to Craig, telling him I would help him go pick up the new desk. When he got back to the house, I informed him that Riley would be coming with us. He seemed a tad annoyed when I told him that, but he agreed. The trip to the store turned out to be nothing weird or suspicious. Presumably because I brought Riley with me. I decided it was time to come up with a real plan. At some point, something is going to have to give. And it's either going to be me or Craig, so I needed to plan this carefully. Luckily for me, I wasn't completely on my own. I had Riley on my side to help me through this. The two of us came up with about a half dozen ideas that seemed viable, but in the end, they didn't end up being realistic enough to work. What about the researchers? I asked. Craig is a secretive guy. If he's taking things into his own hands to create topics for the countdowns, they might have some information. Maybe some type of proof that can show what Craig has really been doing. You don't think that they're in on it with him? Asked Riley. I doubt it, I replied. I don't think Craig is the type of guy that would trust anyone else, especially not with something like this. I've looked through a lot of our topics, and the majority of our topics are things that Craig couldn't possibly have been involved with. And then, I also found a couple things here and there that could have been caused by him. It's like he's filling the gap to make sure we have 13 topics per video. Apparently, I'm another one of the expendable employees. For all I know, the main reason he even brought me out here was to put me in one of our videos. He probably just needs to keep me working here long enough to make sure it isn't too suspicious. Riley didn't let up on her position, and she remained quite adamant that I don't go find the researchers at their house to talk to them. She suggested that she and I both go find part-time jobs and save up money to move into our own place. The problem with that is that I have no clue what Craig's plan of attack will end up being, or how much time I have left until he tries to do something. So I have to make a move fast. I can't afford to wait. I know Riley is against my plan, but there's flaws in every other idea we've been able to come up with so far. She didn't want to be involved with any type of plan that involved me going to the researcher's house and asking them for help so I could piece all this together. So I would be doing this on my own. I did need her help locating their address, though. I didn't want to raise any red flags to Craig by trying to locate this information myself. It didn't take her very long to get me an address, as apparently one of our roommates had gone there before while trying to put together a video of ours. Once I had the address, I sat down at my computer and typed out all the information I had about Craig and the things that happened. I didn't want to leave any detail out that could ultimately help bust this whole thing wide open. I printed off what I had typed up, and then proceeded to put the address to the researcher's house in my phone to see where I needed to go in order to meet up with them. It was about an hour drive from where I was. I emailed one of the researchers saying that I needed to meet up with them in person to discuss one of our videos, and that I needed help with it. The guy I emailed, Drake, was very quick to respond, and said that I was welcome to come over there any time. He and another guy, Tegan, were the two researchers we had, and would be the two guys I needed to speak with to figure all this out. It was getting late out already, so we made plans to meet up the following evening. I met Riley in her room after that and told her about the plans I had for the next day. She was concerned with me going over there and telling them everything, and I shared her concerns. For all we know, These two guys could decide to take Craig's side once they find out what's been going on. They might not want to help me prove what Craig has been doing. It would mean giving up their jobs once Craig and the channel are exposed. This would be a major news story, and the channel would ultimately end up getting shut down. But any reasonable person is going to be horrified once they find out what's been going on. And neither of them are going to be able to know that they're for sure safe from Craig too. So I'm sure they will do the right thing and try their best to help me. Riley and I both kind of took the rest of the night off from work and decided to just spend time with each other. We had a very nice night together, but Riley was just acting a little bit off the whole time. She was acting as if I was being sent off to war the next day, or like she wasn't going to be seeing me again for a while. But still, overall, we had a really nice time together. We eventually put a movie on and drifted off to sleep. The next day, I went through my normal routine for the most part. I was filled with anxiety most of the day. I just wanted to meet up with these guys and get this over with. Finally, I was able to kiss Riley goodbye and head over to meet up with Drake and Tegan. It was evening by this point, and the drive over was smooth and pretty nice. Drake met me at the door when I arrived to their house. It looked like a decent house, just a standard 2 or 3 bedroom home, certainly roomy enough for a couple guys to live in. The two of us met Tegan in the living room, where I introduced myself to him as well. The 3 of us sat down together. Drake started by saying, "So which video did you have questions about?" "Well guys," I said, "I actually didn't come over here to talk to you about one of our videos. I'm here for a completely different reason, but I just didn't want to talk about it until I was with you guys in person." "So what is it?" Drake asked. "Okay, let me try to explain all of this, and keep an open mind until I finish." I continued by telling the two of them everything I knew about Craig. I went over his behavior, the things I witnessed, what I found on his computer, and my theories on how he was trying to set me up. I was waiting for the two of them to tell me that I was crazy, but, to my surprise, their reaction was quite opposite of what I was expecting. They looked at each other and kind of let out a sigh. Drake finally broke the silence by saying, "We've actually discovered some pretty unnerving things on our own. It's been going on for a while now. But, as you probably know, Josh was a researcher as well. When he and Dave both ended up disappearing, Craig's behavior seemed pretty weird. Plus, when we talked to some of the other people that live at Craig's house, they told me that when both of those guys went missing, Craig disappeared for a day or so both times. We definitely have had our suspicions, but it's like, the cops investigated all this stuff, right? So they would have found something when they questioned Craig and looked into him. So we have just assumed it was all a coincidence. But with everything you're showing us, it's pretty clear what's going on." I just sat there stunned. "So what do we do now?" I asked. "Come with us," Drake replied. "There's something you really need to see." I followed Drake and Tegan downstairs into the basement, where they had some more information on Craig. We got downstairs, and Tegan turned on a light in the room. "Okay, just 1 second," Drake said. Drake walked out of the room we were in and returned about a minute later. "So, what do you have to show me?" I asked. Drake approached me, and before I knew it, I was standing in the basement with a taser being held in front of me. "What is this?" I demanded. "Sorry, man," Drake said, "but we have to protect the channel. Once you emailed me about coming over here, I checked in with Craig and told him about it. He told me he thought your behavior was strange. He instructed me to do this if you brought up any information about him. We've got to make sure we keep the channel safe and keep it going." I was at a loss for words. In my heart, I really didn't suspect that these two were conspiring with Craig. Damn, how naive am I? Riley was completely right. All I could think about was how much I wish I'd listened to her. I could be with her right now instead of being here with these psychos. "Just let me go. I won't say a word to anyone," I pleaded. "We can't do that," replied Drake. "We've just got to keep you here until we hear from Craig and he tells us what to do next." I continued to plead, but it was no use. The two of them left me downstairs by myself. My first instinct was to somehow get out of this basement and get back to Riley. I walked up the basement stairs and the door was locked as expected. I tried the windows, but there was just no way that was humanly possible for me to get through them. They had emptied my pockets before retreating upstairs, so I began searching around for anything at all I could find useful in this situation. I spent the next 20 minutes rifling through a bunch of materials that proved to be of no use to me at all, and then I came across something I didn't expect to find. In the corner of the room, there was a small pile of clothes. A couple shirts, a couple pairs of pants, etc. I looked through them, and found that one of the pairs of pants had a wallet in it, and the other had a cell phone. My heart began racing as soon as I saw the phone. I didn't know if it was charged at all, but immediately tried powering it on. As the phone was turning on and loading up, I looked through the wallet. There was a driver's license in it, and the name on it was Josh Whitley. Josh Whitley was the researcher that initially went missing while he was out investigating a local legend. His friend Dave disappeared shortly after when he attempted to find Josh. But they didn't get lost in the woods, and they didn't run into locals and find trouble that way. Instead, they had the misfortune of accepting a job from Craig and ending up in the care of Drake and Tegan. And now, here I was, in the same exact place those two ended up. This phone was my last chance to not meet the same fate Josh and Dave met. Once the phone loaded up, it said, "Please enter a SIM card." I knew that meant that the phone wasn't activated currently on a network, but that wasn't important. I just needed to call 911, and you don't need a SIM card for that. I dialed 911 and hit send. The phone said, "Activating emergency call." But when I put the phone up to my ear, I heard nothing. Only seconds after hitting send, the call ended on its own. I removed the back of the phone to inspect it closer, and discovered that the antenna and other parts had been removed. A wave of dread and disappointment washed over me. Of course, these computer hacker freaks wouldn't leave the phone in a working condition. They probably did this as soon as they had their hands on the phone, and they probably have already done the same thing to mine. It was hopeless. I stashed the phone in my pocket and sat down. I felt defeated and was out of ideas when it came to what I could do. Hours went by, and finally, I heard the door open and someone began to walk down the stairs. It was Drake. He stared at me for several seconds, with the taser still in his hand, and said, "I'm sorry, but it's not looking good for you, man. I talked to Craig. Apparently, as stated in the emails, you were interested in coming over here to talk about an upcoming video, but it was a long drive to an unfamiliar location, and you were trying to make it here at night. At some point, you must have gotten lost on the way, and no one has heard from you since. It'll make an interesting entry into one of our videos. Tegan and I will be back soon." I just stared at Drake in disgust for several seconds, and the next thing I knew, he started breaking down in laughter. He laughed, and laughed, and laughed. He appeared to almost be manic. I remained quiet, observing him in confusion. Once he was able to contain himself and talk again, he said, "I'm just messing with you, man. You're really buying all this?" "What the hell are you talking about?" I said. "Oh, okay, listen, man," Drake continued. "All of this is all Tegan and I. We do whatever we have to do to get our 13 subjects each month. That's what Craig pays us to do. Do you really think a guy like Craig could mastermind anything like this?" "But that doesn't make any sense," I said. "I found the file on Craig's computer, the one that had me on the countdown list." "Dude," Drake replied, "we're fucking computer hackers. Right before we make someone disappear for a video, we hide the stuff deep on Craig's hard drive, in a place where he probably wouldn't look. We share the same server, so it's incredibly easy. We stick a file in a folder that's hidden, so in case we ever get discovered, we can let Craig take the fall. We make sure the files are dated several days before the person goes missing. That way it looks absolutely like Craig is responsible. It's not really that complicated, dude." At this point, I was stunned, and no longer knew what to believe. Drake continued giving me this menacing smile as he slowly walked away and went back up the stairs. I didn't know for sure who was or was not involved, and I certainly didn't trust anything Drake said, but I didn't want my life to end yet. I finally met someone that meant something to me, Riley, and I just hadn't been able to spend enough time with her yet. I wanted so much more for us. When I was with her, I began to see a future. Her and I, marriage, A home, kids, everything, an entire life. And these guys were willing to take all of that away. And for what? To get a few extra views on their videos? I just had to figure something out, as I was no longer willing to admit defeat and sit here, just idling, as I waited to have my life taken from me. They wouldn't be just taking my life from me, they would be taking my life with Riley from me, and I just couldn't allow that to happen. I once again decided to search the entire basement to see what I could find. There was really nothing but a bunch of miscellaneous junk scattered around in different areas. I found a can of air freshener. Maybe I could use this like pepper spray? No, that wouldn't work. Even if it was effective at all, which it probably wasn't, Drake had an insanely strong-looking taser, and if he got anywhere near me, he could take me down in an instant. Plus, they could also have more powerful weapons without me knowing. I found a pack of matches. I could maybe make some sort of flamethrower with the air freshener, but then I went back to picturing myself on the ground getting tasered. The last thing I found was a large package of sparklers. They were just those little kitty sparklers that could barely harm anything. I was just completely and utterly screwed. I decided to lay down and just think. I lied there for about an hour and had an idea. I checked the phone I had to see what time it was. If nothing else, I could at least check the time. It was 3 a.m., and I hadn't heard any walking around or any other noises coming from upstairs, so I assumed the guys had since gone to sleep. I went and found the air freshener from earlier, and to my relief, it did contain a warning which stated that the product was highly flammable. I went through several more boxes and located the aluminum foil I had come across earlier. I put the pack of matches in my pocket and gathered up every box of sparklers there was. I spread out a large piece of aluminum foil on the ground, and for the next hour, one by one, I grinded all the sparklers up, so that only their dust remained on the foil. I quietly walked up the stairs as slowly as I could, and set the foil with the sparkler dust on it on the top step. I set the can of air freshener in the middle of the foil, and surrounded it with sparkler dust. I had one sparkler remaining that I didn't grind up. I laid it on the foil, with one end of it leading into the dust, using it as a fuse. I moved a couple boxes over underneath the steps and stacked them up, and waited. Standing on these boxes, I could reach the highest step right next to the door and light the fuse with the matches. I knew it was a long shot, but I wasn't going to just sit around and wait to die. As soon as I heard someone approach the door and begin to unlock it, I would light the fuse and run to the other end of the room. I sat in this position, ready to act, for hours. It wasn't until well after the sun began to rise that I finally heard movement coming from up above. My heart began to race. If this didn't work, I would be killed right away. Riley's face kept flashing in my mind, and I used this to stay determined. Finally, the noise from up above grew louder, and I knew it was only a matter of time before they checked on me. I got in position and held the matches in my hand. I removed a single match and just waited. Some amount of time later, maybe 5 minutes, maybe an hour, I finally heard someone approaching the door. I struck the match to light it, but it just broke in half. I began hearing keys jingling. I quickly removed another match from the pack and struck it again. Still nothing. I struck it, and finally, I got it to light. The flame was weak, but I managed to keep it alive. I heard the keys being rattled into the lock as I started trying to get the fuse lit. It didn't light as easy as I had hoped. To my luck, I heard the keys drop and hit the ground. Finally, the fuse lit, and I climbed off the box and tried moving away. I heard the key being placed into the lock again and crouched down into the corner. There was a large flash of light once the sparkler powder lit, but not exactly an explosion. I began to pray it caused enough heat for an explosion, but the light began to die down. The door finally came open, and I could hear Drake say, "Dude, what the hell?" I watched from the corner of the room as he began stepping over the concoction I had placed on the top step, and then the explosion finally occurred. The sound from it ripped through me and echoed around the basement walls. My ears were ringing, and for a moment I was blinded. But as soon as I gathered my bearings, I could hear the screams of Drake, and I began to rush the stairs. I could literally hear how wounded he was and began racing up the stairs. I was filled with excitement that my scrap material bomb had actually worked, and adrenaline due to the possibility of being able to escape. Halfway up the stairs, I tripped over something and nearly fell. It felt like I tripped over the can of air freshener, but when I looked down, I realized I had actually tripped over a leg. It was Drake's leg. I made it up a few more steps and found Drake lying in pain. One of his legs had been blown clear off, and he was bleeding out rather bad. I climbed over top of him and rushed into the kitchen, looking for an exit. As soon as I turned to my right, I ran directly into a swinging baseball bat. The blow shocked me and sent me to the ground. I believe any other time, this would have certainly knocked me out. But I was filled with so much adrenaline that I was able to stay conscious. I scrambled halfway up and grabbed the bat. I looked up to see that it was Tegan who I was fighting with, and we wrestled to the ground as we both tried to gain control of the weapon. I was still stunned from the blow, and could do nothing more than hold on for dear life. Somehow, Tegan's grip loosened on the bat, and I ended up with it in my possession. I stood up with it and tried centering myself. My vision was still blurry, and I was having a difficult time maintaining my balance. Once I was able to locate Tegan, I charged at him with the bat. I swung it towards him, barely making contact. At that point, I felt something cold and sharp on my abdomen. The adrenaline masked the pain, but it didn't take long for me to realize that Tegan had given up the bat to go get a kitchen knife. I felt my wound, and my hand was covered in a warm, thick liquid. I could feel the life draining out of me, literally. I weakly swung the bat around, unaware at this point where my target even was. My vision worsened by the second, and suddenly, everything went black. It felt like I was out for only a split second. I started to regain consciousness little by little. Each time I was actually able to open my eyes, I was met with a quick flash of my surroundings. At first, I thought I was dead. But that was until I saw a real-life angel. It was Riley. She was looking down at me, crying. I remember that moment. I was able to feel nothing but sadness for her. Another flash of my surroundings brought relief when I was able to spot the paramedics. I'm not sure how much time had gone by, but they were able to bring me back to the point of being lucid. Once the paramedics got me stable, Riley wrapped her arms around me and began to cry. "I'm okay, Riley. I promise. I'm going to be okay. What happened? You didn't come back, and you never sent me a text. I called the police and brought them here. Craig is here too. He followed us here. But don't worry, the police arrested him. They're arresting Drake and Tegan too, but they're both going to the hospital first. Drake is in critical condition and may not make it," Riley said. "No, wait," I replied. I tried to continue, but was given pain medication and quickly fell out of my state of lucidity. Once I woke up again, I was in the hospital. Riley was there, along with several other roommates of mine. Eventually, the police came to speak with me. They told me that Tegan had told them that Craig had masterminded all of this and threatened them into holding individuals hostage. They blamed everything on Craig, and it was possible at this point that Craig would be the one who went down for everything. I've since recovered completely. Tegan and Drake both survived, but Drake will never walk again without some type of prosthetic leg. The two of them will more than likely be spending the rest of their lives in prison. Both Josh and Dave were found buried behind Drake and Tegan's property, and they were subsequently charged with murder. The Top 13's channel is as strong as ever, although we have a bit more of a moral way of gathering our information. Riley and I are now engaged to be married, and if anything, this experience only strengthened our bond, as she literally saved my life. And for Craig? Well, Craig and I have never been closer. He's actually someone I can consider a friend now. At first, it looked like he was going to be the one that was held responsible for these gruesome crimes, but that quickly changed. That cell phone that I found couldn't make calls or send messages, but I was still able to use the voice recorder on it. So when I was being interviewed by the police, I simply played them part of the conversation I had with Drake and recorded him saying, "Right before we make someone disappear for a video, we hide the stuff deep on Craig's hard drive, in a place where he typically wouldn't look. We share the same server. It's incredibly easy. We stick a file in a folder that's hidden, so in case we ever get discovered, we can let Craig take the fall.